Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Nurul Fidya Harya and my friends Bunga Maharani and Aulia Bagus. We are from Group 6 of Academic Presentation and Class B. So we are here want to explain about gender-based violence. The aim of the presentation is to get information on issues of gender-based violence or GBV. We have divided the presentation into three sections. First, we want to explain about definition of gender-based violence or GBV. Then, we will look at the causes and impacts of the GBV. And finally, we will give some solution of the GBV or gender-based violence. In this presentation, we will talk this material about 13 minutes. So, hold your questions and we will answer your questions after the presentation ends. And let's go to the definition of gender-based violence. So, what is gender-based violence? Gender-based violence is a violent act that based on person's sexual or gender identity. It includes physical, sexual, psychological abuse, coercion, denial of liberty, and economic deprivation. It takes everywhere, and anyone can be a victim or perpetrator. And the effects of the GBV are long-lasting and wide-ranging. It can destroy lives and family, also contributing to many social ills. The example of the GBV are domestic violence, sexual-based harassment, female genital mutilation, and then forced marriage and online violence.
So now we move into the next slide, which are going to be talking about the cause of gender-based violence. Here we have several ultimate factors that can be identified as a cause of GBV. Number one, we have cultural factors. In cultural factors, there are 3 points that can be identified as the cause of it. Number one is patriarchy and sexist views. Patriarchy and sexist views legitimize violence to ensure the dominance and superiority of men. Patriarchy is deeply rooted in our country, which can lead into one mindset that men should dominate every aspect in our life. Number two, we have gender stereotypes and gender socializations. Gender stereotypes is a generalized views or preconception about attributes or characteristics that ought to be possessed by men or women. This is the result from gender socializations, which means boys and girls should act in certain ways that are socialized from birth. Children or adults who do not confront these gender stereotypes are often being excommunicated from their peers for being different. The last point from cultural factors is general acceptance of violence. General acceptance of violence as a public sphere, for example, like sexual harassment for women on street, is a acceptable means to solve conflict and to assert oneself. And then the next factors is legal factors. In legal factors, there are 2 points that can be identified as a cause of GBV. Number one, many victims or women are still being considered guilty. Being a victim of gender-based violence in our society is perceived as a shame or weakness, or it is often said that woman or victim itself is the one that should be blamed for this tragedy to happen, which is not true because a victim or no victim or woman is responsible for anything like this to happen to themselves. This partly accounts for enduring the low level of self-reporting and investigating. Until recently, in some countries, the law is still confused to differentiate between the public and private space, which left women particularly vulnerable to dominance violence.
And in this slide, it's about economic and political factors. In the economic factors, there are 2 points. First, lack of economic resource. Generally, women particularly vulnerable to violence. It makes patterns and poverty that become self-perpetuating, making it extremely difficult for the victims to escape themselves. And the second is unemployment. When unemployment and poverty affect men, this can also cause to assert their masculinity through violent means. And next is political factors. Under representation of women in power and politics, it means they have fewer opportunities to shape the discussion and to affect change in the policy or to adopt measures to combat GBV or supporting equality.
Okay, we're gonna talk about the impact of sexual violence. The first is effect of violence. The effect of violence on children, adolescents, and women can be devastating to their physical, emotional, and social well-being. The next slide is several of impact. The first is mental impact. The mental impact are physical consequences of violence, psychological trauma. The first point of mental impact is the effect of physical trauma can be minor or life-threatening and can result in permanent disability or even death of the victim. Point 2. This damage caused by psychological abuse is often invisible, but the resulting trauma can be far more devastating than that resulting from physical trauma. For example, depression, anxiety disorder, phobias, PTSD or post-traumatic stress or disorder. This trauma can lead to death. As for some victims, they will also suffer suicidal behavior. And then the next is health impact. The health impact are unwanted or unintended pregnancies, unsafe and forced abortion, pregnancy complications, and the last STIs and HIV. Point 1. Sexual abuse of adolescents can lead to unwanted pregnancy, as these women lack reproductive rights and are often forced to have sex without contraceptive use. Point 2. Sexually abused adolescents and women who get pregnant may be forced to abort their pregnancies. They also face a higher risk of unsafe abortion due to lack of access to good and affordable healthcare providers. The point 3 of health impact, it's called maternal complication. It includes preterm labor, vaginal infection, and insufficient maternal weight gain during pregnancy as a result of maternal malnutrition. The last point, point 4, sexual abuse in childhood and adolescence increase the risk of sexually transmitted infection. Fear of violence and social stigma prevent women from getting tested for HIV. revealing their HIV status and availing themselves of treatment.
So, we move to the last slide. In the last slide, it's about for solution of gender-based violence or GBV. And first is be a positive bystander. It's our responsibility to be a positive bystander, to speak up when we see or hear something that abusive, sexist, or discriminatory. We need to be a positive bystander for seemingly small stuff because it is attitudes and behaviors that lead to a culture of accusing and condoning disrespect towards women.
Solution number 2 is to challenge gender stereotypes and celebrating diversity. To achieve gender equality, we need to dismantle and reform countless systems, and we can start by letting little boys cry. A lot of studies show that when women are assertive or displaying stereotypically masculine traits, they're often viewed negatively and often receive backlash. It is happening very often in the workplace. So to challenge gender stereotypes, we can start by reflecting our own language with our family, friends, and our children. Next, solution number 4 is we need to reflect on our own attitude and behavior. It is very important to recognize that we're all on a learning journey and we do not know everything. What matters is that we become aware of our own biases and privilege. So we need to learn more about the issue and what actions we can take to prevent gender-based violence.
In the last solution is become vocal advocate for gender equality. We all have role play for benefits to our community, our families, and ourselves. We need to do it for those people whose future is yet to be saved, who could grow up in the world where men can cry, women can be saved, and gender diverse people can be their authentic selves without fear of harm.